So without further ado, I would like to welcome you all to this evening's Farm Being and Wellbeing Forum. My name is Alma Jordan, and I will be acting as the MC for the event this evening. And I will soon be introducing you all to somebody whom you know very well, Caroline Farrell, Chair of our Farm Family Committee, who will be chairing this evening's event. And I'd also like to thank William Shortall for making this event possible and for bringing together our speakers today. Now, the event will be recorded, and if you have any questions, please use the chat function, or you can raise your hand at the end of the event. And the event should end in around 8 o'clock. I'm going to be quite strict on a time and hope to have everybody back outside enjoying the sunshine in time for 8 p.m. So I suppose the reason why we are all here is quite frankly, it is Farm Safety Week. And as we know, farm safety shouldn't just be about a week, it should be all the time. And unfortunately, over the last 10 years, we've lost 210 people to a farming accident. 45% of those have been our older farmers over the age of 65, and 10% of those were children. Now, a farm accounts for nearly half of all workplace accidents, yet it only accounts for 6% of all workplaces. And this year for Farm Safety Week, along with the messages of Rethink Safety and Rethink Risk, I was very, very keen to introduce the whole area of mental health and well-being, and more so because of the 2019 piece of research that was carried out by Agriland and Empathy, which told us that 50% of farmers, there was 3,000 farmers surveyed, and 57% of those were impacted by feelings of anxiety, 26% by feelings of depression and severe sadness. So it's really important that as we look after our physical health and our physical well-being, that we never ever forget about our mental health also. It's a stressful job, it's a tough job. And if you yourself are suffering, to know where to go and where to reach out. And if you think somebody that you know is suffering, what you can do to help and assist them. So I'd like to thank Caroline for being our chair this evening. And I'd also like to welcome our three speakers: Peter Farrell, farmer and survivor; Noel Guinan, director of the CBT group, who will be talking to us a little bit about safety, but more so about quad safety and handling, especially prevalent with regards to the fact that the rules are going to change towards the end of the year. And I'm also delighted to welcome Clare O'Keefe from Succession Ireland, who will be talking about the area of moderation and having those difficult and courageous conversations. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over now to Caroline to take up the reins and introduce our first speaker.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Alma, for the lovely introduction. And those facts and figures is startling as ever, but we have, I suppose it's just part of a way of life which we just need to change, and hopefully Farm Safety Week will help to do that. And I'm delighted, first of all, along with Alma, to welcome our guest speakers and everybody else who has joined in the conversation with us this evening. First of all, I'll talk to you, Peter. You're a dairy farmer from Clonmel, and I know I had the pleasure of meeting you down in your farm, must be 2 years ago now, when you helped IFA with a farm safety campaign then. And I suppose this evening you're going to share your story with us of the accident that happened to you in June 2009. Now, can you, you're very welcome here, and thank you for coming to talk to us. Can you take us back to the day and tell us what happened?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I certainly can, Caroline. It was a sunny evening like this evening back in 2009, and I had been out working, and I was a bit late coming home to go milking. And I remember I was coming in the yard, and I met my wife Larry, and she was standing in the yard, and I was driving the tractor, and I said to her, "I'm a bit hungry this evening." I says, "You know, we'll have the supper before I go milking. Sure, what hurry are we in? You know, because most people associate bar accidents with rushing and not taking your time and stuff like that. Not always the case, you know." Yeah, this particular evening we had the supper first. I was a half an hour late, so another 20 minutes wasn't going to make any difference to the cows. So I went for the cows and I went milking, and everything was going fine. Background to it, the previous few days I had clipped all the cows' tails in the cattle shed after milking, but I had missed one cow. And lo and behold, she came in the last line of the milking that evening, and of course, with no hurry on me and a full belly, I said, sure, I pull out the electric clippers and I clip her in the parlour while the last of the cows were milking. And of course, that was the mistake. Of course, didn't realise it at the time. I pulled out the tail out over the rump rail, and she was the second cow from the front of the milking parlour, and I had a socket up right near the front, and I plugged in my electric clippers and I proceeded to clip her. And I don't know what happened, whether I gave her a little tip of the yoke or she got a fright or whatever, but the clipper ended up in my eye when it was on. And I needn't tell you, then we had trouble. So I left the milking parlour. I knew I was in trouble straight away. The blood was running down my face, and I went going into Lorraine. But halfway in, I realised that the cows are still, the stuff was still on. The cows were in the parlour. There was no one around. I was only there on my own, so I had to go back out. I lost the clusters of half the cows, and you do get a kind of a piece of energy from it, like, cause you know, and it might be an awful thing. You've got to get back out to the cows. Sure, I couldn't even stand in there because I knew I wouldn't be back for a while. And went straight to Clonmel, and I was taken in immediately into the accident emergency, and in a few minutes I was in an ambulance going to Waterford. Just like that, the whole thing changed in 10 seconds, 5 seconds. And I remember the staff reality of it. I didn't think I was too bad because I never saw my face or the injury, which is probably a good thing. I remember saying to the ambulance driver, they were going out to Clonmel with the sirens on, and I looked up at him and I said, am I really that bad? You know? And that's all I remember. I woke up alone in Waterford and kept 14 days in hospital. Which is like, this is the trouble with an accident. Cows had to be milked the morning after. Rain was down with me during the night, of course, when I came to a bit, of course, I wasn't that worried about myself, but I suppose at the time, I didn't realise what had happened. Like, it didn't tell me anything. But we had to go and organise help. And probably with a farm accident, the farm doesn't stop because the owner gets injured. So cows had to be milked in the morning, whether we liked it or not. We had to get in help. And that's where community and the value of neighbours and all that. I remember on the way into Clonmel, I had to ring one of my neighbours. I couldn't remember whether I stopped the milking machine or not. Go down the yard, and I rang him, and he was over. He said, "Be over in 5 minutes." And he said, "Don't worry about that, and we look after it." And the neighbours all came together there for a day or two to help out until we got doctors. Like, I was in hospital, sure. I didn't know how to go for operations and so forth on the eye. I was out of action there for a while, even out of the phone, like I wasn't just informed. You know, you see the effects of the accidents, like the effects of the accidents are still with me today. That's 11 years and 12 years. It's 12 years and 20 days since the accident. I still see driving machinery and things. You know, your depth perception is poor with one eye. You get used to it. Yes, you have a few more guards bent and broken and things. There's no point in saying we don't have mistakes, especially when you're tired. You know, and I just like to, on this, like with increasing staff numbers, and the farmers are very busy. It's easy to make mistakes, you know. Yeah, farm accidents. Some are caused and some aren't. You know, it.
And you've come on to the next point, or the next question I was just going to say to you is, how have you and your family been impacted by the accident?
Well, sure. Well, we have the impact, like, is it's hard to describe. Like,
every accident, I suppose, is different.
the loss of an eye, right? While it takes a huge amount of time to get used to focusing with one, right? And walking. Like, I remember I used to hate going to matches. I used to always go to matches. I hated going to matches because if there was big people going to the stadium, you'd miss a step. You'd be bumping into people that you normally wouldn't. You know, it's anything on your left, your peripheral vision is very poor, and especially on the left side, it's the left eye I lost, and you know, there is no replacing it. Like, that's. And even to this day, a simple thing at the breakfast table or dinner table, I have to sit in a certain point of the table, or I can't see the lads. If they, you know, they can't sit to my left. I always sit at the front of the island in the kitchen, and the lads always say to my right. If they sit to my left, I can't see them. You know, it's a simple thing, but they're every day, like, you know.
Yeah, you compensate for the part that you can't see, but it would be a continuous strain on yourself and your family and the children.
Yeah, but we're all, you know, it's a good while ago now. We're all kind of used to it now. You know, if the lads want to trick me, they'll sneak up on my left side because they know I won't see them coming. You know,
they're cute enough that way. They learn.
Like, you know, that's one thing. You know, like you cannot see. Like, you know, the left side is a disadvantage. You know, it's an awful thing, and like I see loads of farmers still clipping tails in milking parlours, and I would always, if I had anyone talk about it, I would always tell them no, just not the place, because if anything go wrong, you're working at eye level, and sure you'd say, how could it go into your eye, but you're a deep, like, and I was a fairly accomplished man with a tail clipper that I could see on both hands, like I was very good at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Plenty of experience, you know, but still just got caught.
Still got caught on the wrong day or whatever. Just a small thing just went wrong. I suppose it puts across the point as well that you can never trust a cow, no matter what you're doing with them. Like, it's just, you know,
you have to be.
It probably wasn't the cow's fault, but yeah.
No, I can still tell you it's cow number 441. Yeah, I can still picture her. Yeah, and we kept her for years after. It wasn't her fault, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't trust livestock. They are livestock. They move unexpectedly at times, and you can get, you know, you have to be aware of the dangers, you know, when handling stock, the crush points, and, you know, to be safe, and they can kick back or whatever happens, you know.
And what message would you like to take to people listening, or the people listening, to take away with them this evening, Peter?
Well, always be very careful around livestock, and especially with a lot of robotics and things, with people milking. There's a new test on a lot of farms of clipping hair on others and things, and especially tails. And it's very important to be above, to stand above the cow, to protect yourself first. Don't put the cow first, put yourself first. So don't rush in and, oh God, the robot is missing this cow or whatever. We'll have to clip her. Well, put her out into the chute and do it safely. That's definitely the message I take home. And always take the more safe option when you're handling stock. Put them into the chute. Have it safe where you're standing up over them. No, have it safe.
That's a very, very good point, Peter, and very well made. And thank you for taking the time to talk to us this evening. I think if we've questions and answers, I think we're going to do it after the 3 presentations. So I hope you'll stay around for a while, Peter.
Thanks very much.
It's a pleasure talking to you. And now we'll move on to Noel. And Noel has taken part in numerous demonstrations in the safe handling of quad bikes. And this evening, Noel is offering us advice on how to use your quad safely and avoid serious injury. And I think Noel is going to give us a presentation on it. You're very welcome, Noel. Thanks for joining us this evening.
You're more than welcome. Thanks very much. You can hear me okay there, yes?
Can indeed. Perfect.
Oh, great. We've a good attendance there now this evening. So I suppose I'll just deliver a short presentation just with regard to trying to stick in with the Farm Safety Week, and in particular rethinking safety relevant to quad bikes and the risks associated with quad bikes. I'm probably a bit luckier insofar as I have a PowerPoint presented there just to help everybody along. So needless to say, our caption is rethinking safety, but I suppose the word safety can be dissected as well. It's all about identifying a hazard in the first place. So together, we're all been working with all the stakeholders in the sector in a coordinated effort to unite our voices in reducing farm accidents and tragedies. Because unfortunately, what tends to be published are fatalities, but accidents don't tend to get published as much when it comes to dealing with accidents as a result of falling from a quad bike, and sometimes they can be life-changing injuries sustained, you know. Really and truly, it all starts off at asking ourselves a couple of questions. Number one, how do we rethink safety? Do we have a plan? What tools have we at our disposal to rethink safety, and what does it mean? And then I suppose we are asking ourselves personally, on a personal level, are we already safety conscious? Are we already aware? Do we have the skills to identify what is a hazard with regard to a quad bike? What is a hazard with regard to different terrains or a different ATV type? Or is riding a quad bike without a helmet an actual hazard? Or are we maybe a little bit desensitized, you know? So can we do more? Of course we can. We can always do more, because if we look at statistics, we can see that people are still losing their lives as a result of being hurted when they fall from these vehicles. So yes, we can. And then the next question, which is natural enough then, what can we do? So moving on into the next one there, we ask ourselves on a personal level, how are we doing? So first, with regard to changing the culture relevant to a specific behavioural type, we have to ask ourselves the question, a bit like what Peter was saying there. I milked cows in parlours for years myself, and I often did exactly the same as what Peter was just alluding to, clipping the cows' tails. And I wouldn't have envisaged that that would have happened to me. But I can see now quite clearly that it is a clear hazard, and you're better off putting down the crush and be over the cow, which makes perfect sense. So we always have to step back and take a 5-minute step back and ask ourselves, how are we doing? So together then, we'll all rethink, how do we evaluate our approach? So the tools are there at our disposal. So we have experts in every single field at our disposal now, and they're all very well recognized. And we have them now that we're very much gone onto this platform and everybody has the phone in their hand. It's literally in your hand. The answer is in your hand. So we all have to look out for each other and lead by example. Individually, if we lead by example when it comes to riding quad bikes, well then we'll have a far better chance of making an effect across our community. So in particular, if we look at statistics and who tends to get hurt when we look at these vehicle types, like with ATVs, quad bikes and such, it's typically the younger age group and the much older age group. Okay, and there are many reasons for that. We can outline them as we go along. So moving on to the next bit there, with regard to statistics, like there's 137,500 farms in Ireland. So that's 137,000 businesses, but they're also family farms. So this is your family, my family, living on family farms. And the fact is that we all need these quad bikes. So from a manual handling point of view, from protecting our body point of view, from an ergonomic point of view, traveling over the fields, towing loads, from a time management point of view. I heard Peter mention time management earlier, because typically on farms we're working alone. So with regard to getting access to the remote parts of our farms, the best way to do that is obviously on an ATV, because you're minding the body. So unfortunately, the last line in that then would tell us that the recent statistics published, 10-year statistics, would tell us that over 200 people died in agriculture and forestry in the last 10 years. That is a stark statistic. So moving on here, we have a pie chart here, and that literally goes through all the different types of causation factors when it comes to the fatalities that we've just seen there. So without studying that too much, we can see there on the right-hand side, tractors and vehicles had been accounting for 43% of fatalities. That is stark. So needless to say, quad bikes, albeit a small tractor, are included in that statistic. Moving on to the next one then, that also shows us then, how does that sub-segregate then, what type of injury had the people who had fallen from their quads or been involved in an accident, what type of injuries did they sustain? So that's due to tractors and farm vehicles in that 10-year period. And there's another stark statistic, 43% of all fatalities. So the message is quite clear when it comes to statistics. And I'm happy that this is finally published, because for years we were trying to struggle with regard to getting the message out there and attribute a specific number to quad bikes. So I think it's widely recognized now. So if we just think specifically now with regard to quad bikes, right, and rethinking safety. So the next slide there outlines there that quad bikes account for 19% of all farm vehicle fatalities. And if we subdivide that then again, 75% of those that suffered fatal quad bike accidents were aged 60 years and older. So at a time in our life when we have the vast majority of our efforts given to the farm and reared our family and done our best for society, it's an absolute tragedy that we might be hurted, or even worse, to think that fatally injured from a quad bike, something that's designed to protect our body, and we sustain injuries that either be life-threatening or take your life as a result of using one of these, when it's designed to improve our life. It's designed to improve the ergonomics and to make our day easier. So when it comes to, I suppose, just moving on to the next slide there, with regard to the learnings that we now know from the Workplace Accidents Report that was published by the HSA recently there, it's quite clear that further ATV operator skills training is required. So some years ago, we all took part in the pesticide application course, and I think everybody agreed that it was an absolute success with regard to raising the level of awareness, with regard to the hazards that people are exposed to when dealing with pesticides, and then having the opportunity to join in a group of 10 or 12 people doing the course at the same time, and to share the learnings and to share our life experience. Because that's the one thing the farmers are very good to do. I've been involved in discussion groups for many years now, to be very, very good to share their experience. The one thing that does concern me, though, with regard to farmers, and like Peter there, I milk cows for many, many years, is unfortunately as a group, we tend to more accept injury as part of farming. So when people suffer a loss of limb or suffer a life-changing injury, they tend to accept that as part of farming. And I would just like to challenge that, to say that if this was any other occupation, they wouldn't accept it. So when it comes to Farm Safety Week and rethinking safety, that would be just my challenge with regard to quad bikes in particular and the wearing of helmets and so on, is to just take a step back and not to accept getting injured, because we won't accept getting injured in our car or in the Jeep going to the market or the trailer. So why would we accept it with a quad bike when it's designed to make our life easier? So with regard to that then, there are changes planned, as was mentioned earlier this year in 2021, regarding both of those items, and I just had that in red. So moving on to the next slide, we just want to talk specifically about ATVs and quad bikes for the moment. So for those of you who are not familiar, an ATV is an all-terrain vehicle. And if you can see the caption on the left-hand side, that's a tracked utility vehicle. So essentially that will travel on all terrain, winter and summer, night and day, in and out of water and so forth. Very, very capable machine in the right hands, obviously, when the person that's using that machine avails of the appropriate training. But there are many, many differences between both of those vehicles. The one on the right then is what we're far more used to seeing on farms, which is a typical quad bikes, quad being 4 wheels, okay, so rubber tires. So each one has its own characteristics, and when you're going to purchase one, it's very, very important that you would seek advice from the retailer and try and match the vehicle to the end use. And that would be one of the things that I would see myself when I do farm inspections or farm safety work, is that typically they have a bike that's either under-spec'd or over-spec'd for the end use. Okay, so moving on to the next slide there, this just gives 3 different captions, and it just alludes to what types of environments you can use these vehicles in if we just focus on the quad bike for a few minutes. So actually that's my claim to fame on the left there, if any of you didn't know me before there. So that's just a quad bike working in woodland, we'll say tending to stock or whatever. So the few things that is very obvious about that photograph is, number one, the posture that I'm demonstrating in that caption. So essentially the bike is traveling uphill or navigating an ascent. And in the event of that happening, you must put your body forward as possible, or as forward as your body allows you, to try and bring your body weight over the front wheels. And that helps to reduce the likelihood of bike overturning. And you maybe suffer entrapment and asphyxiation underneath the bike, because that has happened in the past, unfortunately. And the other side of things is, to have those skills, it would make a lot of sense that people would go and learn from a professional how exactly to maneuver that bike and what type of terrain that bike is designed to navigate. And obviously, that the ability of that bike to navigate that terrain is going to change considerably if it's the case the bike is loaded. So that rack that's on the front, just in front of the handlebars there, that is designed to carry a load, as is a bale rack on the back. And they also would have hitches, in which case you're going to be carrying trailers and such like. So over on the top right then, that's a different type of quad bike then, which is designed and manufactured and sold as a road legal ATV. So that bike then has a fixed box on the back, in which case then, if with the appropriate license and insurance and so forth, and that bike having a certificate of conformity to be allowed travel on the road, you could literally go and tend to your stock with that type of vehicle, but you would notice a distinct difference between the tire type on both of those vehicles. Because needless to say, when you're traveling on the road, the tires are significantly important when it comes to the amount of traction you're going to attain, both navigating bends and when it comes to stopping. And in the bottom right one then, that's just another caption of tending to animals. So in this case, it just happens to be sheep. That happens to be just down the road from where I live. So that's my view. I'm very proud of that. In which case then, this is where training comes in when it comes to using that vehicle to save your body, not to be walking over rough ground, not to be carrying loads, and use the quad bike as it was designed to carry the load and make it safer for you. But in that case, it's very obvious that the rider is wearing the appropriate head protection, he's wearing a helmet, he's wearing sunglasses so the sun's not in his eyes. There is a face guard so that there's no sharps or dust or whatever going into the man's face. And he's wearing a bright coloured vest so that the traffic, who might not expect to see a quad bike on the road, is far more likely to observe this rider on the road. Being a smaller vehicle, you are a vulnerable road user. And needless to say, it's very important to be having your lights on to try and assist with that being the case. Okay, so moving on to the next one then, with regard to, keep coming back to our caption here with regard to rethinking safety, right? So 3 things that we need to just concentrate on with regard to quad bikes. Firstly, would be operator training. Okay, now operator training with an approved trainer in a managed event where you turn up, you're going to be concentrating on wearing the appropriate safety gear, gloves, safety footwear, and head protection. It's delivered in a controlled manner, and needless to say, going away from that, one of the learning outcomes would be able to ascertain what would be the correct speed approaching different terrain and for example, if it's a case you have your bike loaded, how much of a speed change should you adopt relevant to the bike and the load that you're carrying? So a lot of people, in my experience, and I'm at this a long, long time, always assume that speed is the primary causation factor for a quad overturning or for a quad being involved in an accident, people sustaining injuries. And that's actually not the case. So a lot of it has got to do with knowing the machine, knowing the ground, having the skills. But it's very important to note that with these type of vehicles, so just to give you an example, if we move to the next slide there, that caption on the next slide there demonstrates, we'll say, like a 10-degree slope. So that's, we'll say, it was during a training course that we were delivering. So traveling along a slide slope, the rider must consistently move their body around to try and manipulate the bike and transfer their weight to the higher side of the hill to reduce the likelihood of the bike overturning. So that gives you a good idea of how far to your right as you look at it that the rider needs to be to try and reduce the likelihood of the bike overturning. Okay, so a typical quad bike skills training session would include legislative obligations and course syllabus, as you would have in any training course relevant to a vehicle. You're going to be going through extensive mechanical learnings and vehicle checks. which we would all be very aware of because we have so much machinery on our farms now. Our farms become so heavily mechanized. We need to be very much clued in with regard to how they work and how to check them and to maintain a good standard of bike and be able to risk assess a quad bike. And when you go and you do your vehicle checks in the morning, be able to ascertain then, do a risk assessment. Okay, this is now damaged on the bike, or the bike might be low on coolant or maybe incorrect tire pressures. How is that going to affect me? And try and consistently have your frame of mind thinking about a hazard and then risk assessing that. Is this going to place me in danger? Is it okay to ride this bike? And then needless to say, most of your day when it comes to taking part in a quad bike training course would be about riding skills and navigating different terrains. So when you go away from taking part in one of these courses, similar to previous courses in the past, as I alluded to earlier, like the pesticide course, that you're going away with a thorough understanding and a good confidence with regard to how to navigate with these vehicles and how to maximize your safety, but whilst using the features of that bike to benefit you during the day as you go about your work. Okay. So moving along there to the next slide there. This is just a statement then, again, I suppose, if I just read this out to you guys, the accidents relating to quad bikes remain unacceptably high. So we have to agree on this. Like, I don't think anybody will accept the stats that we have just seen at the earlier cited presentation, with quad bikes accounting for over 6% of all work-related fatal accidents involving vehicles during this 10-year period. So that is a stark statistic. We as a group need to do something about that. So I think now that we have the information and it's in black and white in front of us, we also have the answer. So the high incidence of accidents has prompted the Health and Safety Authority to put forward new regulations, which include all quad bike users being legally required to wear appropriate head protection at all times when we're operating a quad bike and undergoing operator skills training. So the reality of this is, and I, as it was alluded to earlier in presentation there, I've been doing demonstrations on behalf of the HSA for many years at the ploughing match. Unfortunately, we haven't had a ploughing match now in some recent times. Hopefully next year, with fingers crossed. And in talking to many farmers year after year, they all tell me that they don't have a helmet. They didn't even purchase one, and that concerns me. So that also brings home the fact that there is a lack of awareness when it comes to the need for appropriate head protection. And that's why this legislation has been put forward. It's to benefit us. So we all look forward to getting involved. So moving on there, next slide there, we can achieve our target of achieving fewer fatalities and injuries at work on our farms together. So we'll all individually change our behavior so we wear our helmet, one quad bike at a time. And then that will grow the movement of awareness. We can all look forward to learning more about the dangers of operating machinery and raising awareness regarding the value of operator training and the wearing of appropriate head protection when using our quad bikes. Okay, so the message for this year is quite simple. It's rethink safety. And within, just on the next slide there, within that caption, rethink safety, and that's what I've just put it in red. Safety is about two things: identifying a hazard. What is the hazard? In this case, I'm specifically speaking about ATVs and quad bikes. But what is the risk? The risk is overturning the bike, becoming trapped underneath the bike. The reality is we're going to be using these quad bikes in remote locations. So typically we'd be on our own. So it's very important also to bear in mind that that very quad bike that you might have fallen from in a remote location could very much be the only way to get help to you. And I found that in the past, I've done many courses in crisis management when there's an accident down the farm and whoever has maybe fallen from the quad or whatever, and we need to get help to that person quickly. It's very likely to be the case that the only way to make your way down the fields is on the quad bike. So it's important to have that discussion with your family members at home. Should it be the case that anything ever happens on the farm, that people go away and they get trained, and it raises awareness with regard to the advantages of having one of these if it's used properly. So the message for this year, again, just to recap, is rethink safety, which aims to encourage a deeper awareness of everyday hazards on farms and the practical steps needed to reduce risk. And we all agree that this is needed. So it is fair to say that the regulations will be coming in at the end of the year, will make the wearing of appropriate head protection a mandatory requirement, as much as it will to do appropriate training. Okay, so my message is quite simple. From my point of view, I would suggest everybody get ATV operator skills training and apply yourself to it when you go to do the training. Okay, and of course wear your helmet. So just our last slide then is thanks very much for getting involved, and I hope you enjoy being part of the change to rethink safety on our farms. My message is always quite simple. It seems to be the same for the past 15 years, guys, is use your head, wear your helmet. So thanks very much. There's a last slide there, again, is rethink safety. So thanks very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Noel. That was a very informative talk, and as I say, a good use your head is certainly a very wear your helmet is certainly a very good tagline that is easy to pick up, and you know, one that can be repeated and repeated and repeated in any area where there is a quad and there is a helmet, and make sure that the helmet goes with the quad and is on the driver of the quad. And as I say, the changes coming down the line, legislative changes will make a big difference to people, because they're going to have to do it, and it will be they will be inspected, assume, once the legislation is brought in. So maybe we've come to the stage now where we have to start using legislation to try and increase farm safety. And as I say, maybe if there's a few questions at the end, we can come back to it, Noel. And thanks again for a very enlightening talk. And now we'll move on. We'd be delighted to mention Clare O'Keefe from Succession Ireland. It's lovely to meet you, Clare, and you're very welcome this evening, and thank you for joining us. You're a third-generation farmer on your home farm, and you have a master's in extension and innovation from UCD, and you're going to talk to us about courageous conversation and how modernisation with succession planning can be beneficial. So I'll leave it to you, Clare, and thanks again.
Thank you very much, Caroline. I will leave, you can go back to the first one there, Alma, for a moment. I will leave my own camera off because we don't have enough broadband here for my camera to be on while I'm speaking. So just bear with me. Thank you. So just in preparing for this evening's presentation, focusing on farm safety and linking this in with difficult or courageous conversations, it brought me back to the National Ploughing Championships, and I stand to be corrected on the date, but I think it was 1990. You can move on to the second slide now, Alma. And it was to the IFA stand, where the focus that year was a special visual feature on farm safety. And within the IFA tent that year, there was a varied selection of large real-life picture images capturing potentially dangerous and devastating farm accidents. Outside, just close by the tent, there was a visual static display of a simulated accident involving a small square baler. Quad bikes were not as prevalent then, if memory serves me right. There was no audio, no commentary, no video rolling. There was no sound, just indicators and signs for farm and farmer safety awareness. So the message needs to be conveyed loudly and clearly in every way we can. You can move on, Alma, thank you. So while technology has changed, the message of farm and farmer safety is still applicable to all of us who work within agriculture. And according to CSO 2020 figures, over 99% of farms in Ireland are classified as family farms. And Noel outlined that there was 137,500 farms in Ireland, so 99% of that is a lot of farms classified as family farms. Now, family farms are where the farmer, the farming family, and the farmer are all integrated. You live, you work, you sleep, you share most of your daily hours with the same people. So in Kiwi's research of 2020, they outlined where home and farm are intertwined, where one grows up and was reared, evokes a collective memory of family immersed in the farming activities. You can move to the next slide, Alma, please. Now, just for a moment, I'd ask you to focus on the left-hand side, the hard skills. And what hard skills are? These are the technical skills, the knowledge that farmers have, what they've learned growing up and what they learn from advisors, from consultants. It's the skills they have which makes them knowledgeable on all aspects of farming, the technical skills, the thought skills, the KT knowledge, things which are measurable and manageable. We're now familiar with date and time scheduled farming styles. Words like KPIs, key performance indicators, these have become part of our language within the farming community. Quantifiable targets, it's result focused. These are what are termed hard skills. Balancing that with soft skills. And this is the area where, until recently, this did not receive the same amount of research, but it's the area that is of equal, if not more, valuable. But the soft skills are actually the harder skills to learn and to develop. The soft skills cover people skills, how we communicate. Emotional intelligence comes under soft skills. Empathy. Listening to understand, not listening to give advice or listening to give your opinion or waiting to tell your story. Listening to understand the other person. Reflecting back on what they said and what you've said yourself. Thinking back, could I have done something differently? What did I learn from that? Your own self-care, even in this heat, becoming exhausted and taking shelter and stopping. Debriefing. Debriefing is a word that's coming up much more in the academic world, and it is where you go with whatever you've heard, if it's that you don't bring home that message to your own family, where you take time out to look after yourself professionally. So whatever you've done during the day, you can park it professionally and leave it, that you're not bringing home the negative impacts of work with your own family. And as farmers, if something happens on the farm, and things will go wrong, it doesn't have to be as tragic or as horrendous as a farm accident, but even the death of an animal, or if you only got bitten by the dog and you felt like giving him a kick, where you leave that outside the door when you're coming in the evening. I always say to people, if the weather is bad and you're wearing Wellingtons, when you're washing your Wellingtons, leave the misfortune of the day outside. In this weather, you might be wearing a very light pair of shoes, but leave the difficulties of the day outside. And when you come in home, be there for your family. So moving on, Alma, to the next slide, please. So in the intervening 30 years, just going back to the ploughing of the 1990s, the hard skills focused on research, education and best practice within the farming community. And we owe a huge debt to the research which has brought us to where we are in production and in technology today. And more recently, the body of research within agriculture has encompassed the softer skills. And the softer skills here include appreciating and understanding farmer values, farmer identity. If you can visualize the sheep farmers, they relate to each other, even in an unspoken language, as the dairy farmers do. The tillagemen, they know what it means when they say, well, you know, I'm starting the combine this evening because the weather is good. And the tillage people understand that. To an organic vegetable producer, that might have a different meaning. Their focus might be conserving water this week. So each farmer identity has their own identity in their own sector, and appreciating that. Attachment to place is really significant in Ireland. It comes from our historical background and how people developed their farms to where they are today, and how they got them from the previous generation, or acquired them or bought them. And that attachment to that holding is part of their story, and it's part of their identity within the community. And family farm dynamics, it's a fascinating subject. Where you are in the family, if you're the eldest, the middle, the youngest, even let's say two twin girls, there will be a pecking order even between them. While they may be identical, we've seen in research the differences in family farm dynamics with children who may seem to be quite similar. And understanding the dynamics of family farm, where you're reared at the place where the work is carried out, where your parents may be your employers, and you may want to be the next CEO of that farm, but you don't know how long the existing boss owner will remain there. So the communication challenges on farm topics include succession discussions. Succession discussions are the #1 most difficult topic which families find, because it's like the outer layer of an onion. Once you go and decide we're going to look at the succession topic, you peel back the layers. Relationship issues will emerge here. The viability of the business, the financial planning required, if there's 1, 2 or 3 incomes to come off the farm, or does that farm need 1 or 2 off-farm incomes to support it? These are all part of a succession planning discussion. A change in the business structure. And if there is a farm accident, this could be an immediate change in the business structure. But I'm taking it here that people have the choice and they have time to make these changes. But if the unexpected happens, and it does happen, sadly, it can be an illness, it doesn't have to be an accident. The unexpected can make it much more difficult for communication to proceed in an enlightened way without emotions clouding it. Trying to separate the facts from the emotion can be a real challenge when people are dealing with trauma as well, and where communication is broken down, and sadly that also happens in families, but we try to prevent that by facilitating communication, facilitating difficult conversations if people need a helping hand along the way. So the next slide, Alma, please. And I see the text here has slightly recreated itself, but what it did say, well, at least the way I'm reading it is slightly different. The large wheel at your right hand side said succession conversations. And once a family decides that we need to do something on the succession line, we need to start thinking or talking. It will present challenges and it will present opportunities. Because succession is a process. Succession conversations are not just a once-off event. It needs to be given time to listen to and to include all of the family. It is an opportunity. The outcome does matter. And it is the family's opportunity to do what is best under the circumstances at the time. The challenges, the unexpected might come in from the side. There may be more challenges, for example, a sense of entitlement, to unrealistic needs and wants by other family members. So you're opening up a process that does take time, and it is not just an event. So the next slide, please, Alma. Yes. So when faced with potentially difficult conversations, and succession planning for some people can be a potentially difficult conversation. So what are your options as a parent, if you are a parent, as a farmer, as a neighbour of a farmer, an IFA member, as a family member? So what we do in Succession Ireland, we help people to identify and to address the assumptions. What are the expectations around this farm, and what are the expectations of each family member? We always start with the asset owner or asset owners, and we ask these questions of them. So what are the responsibilities that need to be addressed for this family? If there are people with limited ability or special needs, while they are hugely important in looking in their needs or need to be looked after into the future, I always say the bird with the weakest wing needs to be looked after first. So are the responsibilities there which need to be addressed? What are the hopes and fears around the succession planning and the future of each member of the family, and for the asset owners if they are considering changing their position within the family? What would be the ideal outcome for you, your family and your farm if you were given the time to consider succession planning? Because if you don't know what the ideal outcome would be, we need to know where the goalpost is to start aiming for it. And remember that doing nothing is also an option, but the law will dictate what happens to your assets if you decide to do nothing. That is, should you die without having made any succession plan or any will of any sort. So being proactive gives more options than just reacting to a situation. So while technology has changed, we are all sitting behind screens this evening. So moving on to the last slide, the tillage farmer that you can see on the last slide, thanks Alma, is actually the same man who was ploughing 30 years ago. Here he's using the min-till system. Change can facilitate advancing on and staying comfortably working within your sector and making progress. You know, just remember, planning the succession process gives you more options and more choices. Yeah, planning succession conversations can be facilitated. And from my experience, they rarely happen on a good fine day like today. They tend to happen when the weather is hard and people are tired and the prices are bad and the outlook is bleak. And we get all the phone calls when the clouds are lower. A day like today, the phone doesn't ring. People are in a good space. But it's important that we mind each other when the days are difficult. So reach out and ask, be proactive. It's your choice. Farm safely, and thank you for your attention. Thank you, Alma.
Thank you very much. That was a wonderful, informative presentation, and food for thought for a lot of us, certainly personally speaking anyway, in your presentation. And I suppose you're right, on a fine day, people are out happy, busy doing things. It's on the wet days and the miserable days that people are miserable and wondering why are they here at all. But anyway, thank you very much for your presentation. And as I say, maybe we'll go to any question, if anybody has any questions. I know this, Alma will, I don't know, do you get any questions from anyone, Alma, as to go along, or do people just want to put up their hand?
I've nothing currently in the chat function, so if you do have a question, please do raise your hand. I actually have a question for you, Clare. You've recently been certified with a Master's in Agriculture, Innovation and Extension from UCD just in 2020, so congratulations there. What I'm interested to know is this topic covered in courses such as that? So to kind of prepare maybe, you know, the third level student, or the third level ag student, or, you know, the master's student, is this topic being tackled so that they can prepare themselves for these conversations?
While I don't want this to be about me, but my thesis was, and I should actually pull down one of my folders to see it was, and it was the education which Teagasc advisors are, and I specifically looked at Teagasc advisors. Are Teagasc advisors sufficiently trained in soft skills? So I'm paraphrasing now. So I looked at young advisors who were with less than 5 years, to long-term serving advisors, to regional managers, right up along. And right across the board, there was no training to date given. So it is hoped, and I hope I'm not breaching confidentiality here now, but as part of my own research, it's like turning a huge ship to create a module that's accepted academically to allow training to be offered. Under SECRA, CECRA, under SECRA, it's a European certificate for agricultural consultants. That is the easiest, easiest in that it's going to take a year, if not 2 years. That is one way that training will be facilitated, that will give a module on soft skills dealing specifically with succession. It's not in level 8, which would be degree level. Moving on from level 8, postgrad, yes. In the masters that I'm doing, or that I've done, sorry, it would be easier to bring in a module at that level, but not at level 8, not degree level. It's very difficult.
Okay,
to be honest.
With the business of farming focused so much on within the third level qualifications, you would think that, you know, your farm's business should also be covered off, especially with the legalities. And we all know how difficult and contentious these conversations can be. There's a lot of emotion, there is a lot of feelings, you know, so it can be difficult. So yeah, no, I was just kind of curious to hear if it is tackled at all. So thank you for that.
What is tackled is what's called PBL, problem-based learning, but that could be anything. So giving students a problem and they come up with a solution, but it doesn't have to be, it could be anything. It could be a farm accident that could be their story that they're resolving. It could be changing systems, just training them in resolving problems, but it doesn't have to look in any way towards succession planning.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Anybody else has any questions coming in? No?
I think there was an awful lot of very good information given out, so it covered a lot of the issues, and queries would have been built into the, I know certainly anything I had thought about asking was there in the presentations anyway, by everybody. Yeah, so I think so. And do you want to?
I have more questions just for Noel, actually. Noel, something that comes up a lot, is especially in events that I might do with children, etc. And it's mostly around the cost of a quad bike versus the cost of a helmet, or the cost of training. Can you let me know what those price brackets actually are? Because it just seems strange to spend many thousands on the quad, and then the children used to struggle with trying to work out, well, why can't they spend an extra X amount on what a helmet is?
Yeah, I think you've touched on an interesting one now when you start about talking about money and farmers and value for money and such like. But we'll start with the smallest figure. So the smallest figure is around 100 euros, 90 to 100 euros is the cost of a helmet. So there are varying different helmets that all have the same crown protection. Some of them have different features. So if we just, I suppose, circulate our conversation at the start around the features that a quad bike helmet should have. It should have a basic crown protection. It must have a strap to hold it on your head, of course. It would be ideal if it had the facility to put on ear defenders, the facility to put on a face shield, and so on. And ideally be of a bright color so that people can see you, you know. So like I said, we'll start with the smallest figure, like 100 euro for a helmet. Next along then, quad bikes vary considerably in cost. Like I've invested in some new ones there for our own training enterprise this year, and they vary considerably in price. So like an old used vehicle could be bought for about 2,000 euros. The challenge with that type of a vehicle is it usually has had quite a difficult life. There's evidence of poor maintenance. It's going to be unreliable, and likely to pose dangers. Like, so when we're buying a new vehicle, we need to ask ourselves, is there likely defects that are going to be either dangerous, defective, or don't work, right? So damaged, defective, or dangerous. That's what we're asking ourselves when we're buying a new vehicle. So quad bikes then, from an old used vehicle, so maybe about 2,000 or 3,000, all the way up to about 14 or 15,000. And typically they would be petrol vehicles, although you can buy some diesel vehicles as well. I have one or two myself. And then after that, then you're going into a much higher spending bracket, somewhere between 15 and 25, which are pretty much all UTVs are diesel. There are a few on the market that are petrol. They are pretty much all, they're described as a sit-astride UTV, so utility vehicle, or ATV, all-terrain vehicle. There are distinct differences between both types of vehicles. So the obvious difference is the size. So a smaller quad bike type vehicle can pretty much go anywhere you would bring a donkey, so long as you have the skills and the training and the helmet, wearing the helmet to bring it, because they are very, very versatile, dynamic machine. They have good ground clearance, and because of the size of them, the fact that they occupy such a small ground space, they can pretty much creep over all of those, grounds and indentations, undulations as you're climbing up to the hills, right? Whereas the UTV type vehicle, although they seem like far better value, because you can sit astride them, you can jump in. What tends to happen is that the older farming community tend to buy the UTV ones. They're far more expensive, but having said that, they carry a greater load. They will tow a greater load. You would buy them typically as a road legal vehicle from new. Obviously, there are less considerations with regard to fueling because they're a diesel vehicle. And most importantly, as one of the speakers just had alluded to, like 99% of our farms are family farms. So it makes a lot of sense that if you need to travel to see your stock and work your farm and you're using an ATV, that maybe one of those might suit you better if it's a case that you have the old, which are minding our farm, and then you have the very, very young. So they can actually travel together. So you can get into one of these vehicles, close the door, they're in out of the cold, you can wear seat belts, and a far safer vehicle from that perspective. However, in the absence of training, people tend to try the same types of terrain with both vehicles. And they'll soon find out that the UTV or the gator type vehicle don't travel on those really steep slopes. because they don't have the same ground clearance, and if a far bigger machine with a higher center of gravity, you have no ability to try and regain control. So a distinct difference between two types of vehicles would be that there's a ROPS system, comes as standard, which is a rollover protection system like a roll bar, would come on a UTV type vehicle, because you cannot regain control of the vehicle. If it decides to overturn, you're sitting in there and you're hoping that the rollover bar will protect you, and you're strapped in with a seatbelt. Whereas with the quad bike type of vehicle, they are designed for active riding. So you do need to have a good level of the dexterity. You would need a good level of fitness to use a quad bike, because you need to be moving your body forward, back, left and right and so forth. And just with Alma, you mentioned about children as well. Like, one of the common misconceptions with the quad bike type vehicle is the length of the saddle. And what tends to contribute to a lot of accidents is that people bring passengers on quad bikes, when they're clearly stated by the manufacturer the prohibition to bring passengers. So what happens a lot out there on farms, and it doesn't ever hit the headlines, is that children fall from these vehicles and they sustain injuries. So the long saddle is purely only to allow the rider, a lone rider, to move their own body weight forward and back, depending on whether they're going up a hill or down a hill. So I think that's a common misconception out there, and again, a bad practice that has creeped into the farming community, where they bring passengers on them, and they're not designed to bring passengers. You know, so just from a value for money point of view, it's very, very important. Similar, if you were going to buy any new piece of plant or machinery on your farm, you're investing that hard-earned money in that machine. You're hoping it's going to make your life easier. With that new machine brings inherent hazards and a risk to you. So, like, induction is really important. Trailing is really important. Like, I'm still very heavily involved in the mechanical side of farming, and if we bought a new corn drill, we'd give 2 days learning about it. So it shouldn't be any different to our quad bike. So that complacency has crept in. So I'm glad to see that there is a mandatory requirement coming in for the training. So that will make a difference. It hopefully will make a difference. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
It did. Thank you very much. Your wealth of information. Caroline, you did have your hand up there, and I'm going to bring you in there, and then I'll be asking you to close out the meeting if there's no other questions.
Okay. Well, actually, Noel managed to answer the question. It was going to be about roll bars, but I think you said the bigger machines have roll bars included, or it's built into the system. So I think that will answer the question. I know there's not. There isn't joined up thinking on roll bars on quads, and there's different of opinions along the way. So anyway, we leave that for another day. And I would like to thank our three speakers, Peter, Clare and Noel, for joining us this evening, and also for Alma for facilitating and doing a great job organising the evening. And just to let anybody know, or everybody know, that we're going to do another talk with different speakers on Thursday evening at 7:30, and you can register for that on the IFA webpage /Farm Safety FSW21. And thanks again, and we really appreciate you giving us your time this evening, and anybody who joined. And I'm sorry about my technical issues at the beginning. I was sitting here and I kept saying connecting, and I'm saying, where's everybody? And obviously when I rebooted, I eventually got it going, but reboot. And I say apologies for that. And as I said, poor Alma was under enough stress now without me pulling the whole thing down around her. But again, thank you very much. And we'll talk to you again, please God. Thank you.
Okay, good to talk. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Is Peter going to want to chat with?